The whole tenor of the city just completely changed. People didn't know what to do. It got very quiet. I think people were just so, they just went into survival mode. They wanted to help, they wanted to serve.
We had to work, basically 24/7, getting the supplies to the guys that were searching in the pile, making sure that they had everything they needed. There was no discernible object in the pile. It was just all completely pulverized into a pile of twisted metal. And all the stucco and concrete that was in the building was turned to powder. A lot of people on the pile looking for, people that had passed on and looking for victims, actually looking for people to rescue, so that anticipation was there. And I remember, we're going to find somebody, we're going to find somebody, and we didn't. There was so much more to do, and just stopping like that, that was really tough on all of us.
People kept hoping for good news, and it just seemed to get worse and worse. And it was just a really hard time for people to have to process what was happening right there in the city. And of course, it just changed everyone's life for several weeks and months afterwards. Yeah, it was just weird. It was just a weird, it was a horrible thing to happen, but just the way it just changed how everyone went through their day. Yeah. It was just, you still just could not process what had happened. It was just so far out of anyone's existence. And to think the entire 2 towers came down, it was just, nobody ever would have thought. It helped put things in perspective. You realized just kind of the annoying things that happened to you during the day just really don't matter. When you know there are other forces out there that are really trying to hurt you, then it's okay if somebody cuts in front of you in the car or in the grocery store or whatever. And I noticed that with people in New York as well. People were just less anxious to get angry. Everyone was more tolerant, more forgiving, more patient. And unfortunately, I think we've all forgotten that and lost that feeling of perspective.
You'd find that there was civilians out there with signs and, well-wishers and, saying thank you heroes and all this stuff. And, it wasn't about being a hero. It was about going in for your country and helping them. It was about being there for your country, about doing what you have to do to support. And, one of my lasting memories is the fact that New Yorkers are nice people, really good Americans. And being involved in that was just quite a great experience for me, to see the resilience and the effort that they wouldn't stop. I feel that anything can happen in a moment's notice, and it's always important to be prepared. And I didn't feel that way before. And now after this experience, I feel that I'm ready for anything. And that's why I'm involved in the community on the CERT team, which is the Community Emergency Response Team. Its creation was due in part to terrorist acts, natural disasters, things that happen in your community where you need your neighbors to know what to do.
And being an amateur photographer like I am, I wanted to go there and experience it firsthand and, and document it, because that's kind of what I like to do. It was a pretty moving experience because there were so many memorials that were just kind of all around the perimeter of people who lost loved ones. Stories from like 6th grade classes in Ohio that had sent messages there. In a lot of ways, I think it changed everybody, not only in the United States, but all around the world. That there are folks out there who, for whatever reason, want to do, things that will impact our American way of living.
I fiddled with the radio a little bit looking for a news report, and then I started pacing, and then I finally realized I had to go home and close the shop. And I went upstairs, and upstairs it was a shop in a converted home, and upstairs there were offices. And one of the counselors was in that day, and I knocked on the door and I said, "You're not going to believe what just happened." And I told him. And he said, "Well, what time is it over there?" And I said, "It's about 9 o'clock. And he said, "Oh, well, you know, thank goodness the buildings will be empty at that time in the morning." And I had to explain to him, "No, you don't understand Americans. Those buildings are full of people. This is big." And I went downstairs and I ran into somebody else I knew who happened to be American, and I told her, and she said, "I don't have time for this right now. I have a client." And so I just began to feel a little bit like an orphan, a little bit like a ghost. I just didn't understand why people were continuing with life, and after, did they not hear this? Did they not know? And I realized that ever since then there's been this sort of restless urgency, and I always feel a little bit restless, and I always feel a little bit urgent. And I think it's because being a witness to such destruction and such massive death, all those people went to work that morning with plans for that night. Every morning that we wake up, we have plans for that night, and we have no idea what's going to happen. And you know, the possibility of something that horrific ever happening again, I think, is very, very slim. But it did just make me realize how short and precious life is, and that anything can happen at any moment.
I am more aware of what fear does to you. It paralyzes you. And I know all this hatred and division and violence and uncomfortable people are just because they're afraid. And that's why I have dedicated my whole life to just open my home. I have already opened my heart, my soul, my mind. I invite people to my home. We do peace picnics. We do iftar dinners, we do Eid brunches, anything to break down all those barriers and remove the fear. In reality, we are all Americans, and the sooner we will figure that out and accept, the better it would be for our nation.
I got a little obsessive about it and thought, you know, I need to make sure I'm living my life in a great way, an impactful way. Am I giving back all that I can for my community? Because for me, it really did make a difference what had happened. Even though I was, you know, all the way on the other coast, I wanted to give blood, but of course the lines were forever long at all the blood centers. You know, just wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I turned to really ramping up my volunteerism in the community. I want to stay busy. I want to stay engaged, and I want to make sure I'm giving back to the community as much as I'm getting out of it, if not more. And you know, I always make sure, when I had first moved out here, I was Miss Independent. You know, I want to stand on my own 2 feet, but I have to say, after the tragedy of 9/11, I make sure all my loved ones know how much I love them every day. I talk to my dad probably 3 times a week, just so that he knows how much I love him. So I mourn so much for those people, even 10 years later. It's hard to imagine what those families go through.